Mr. Mayor, we're not hearing you on the.
Are you hearing them? Because I'm not.
I'm not hearing them at all.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Rasucci? Can you hear us?
I'm here now. I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you before.
We can't hear him. Testing. Testing. Testing.
We can hear the testing.
Okay, here we go. Okay, Deputy Mayor Rasucci,
Here.
Councillor Hicks, Councillor Hart,
Here.
City Manager Alba, here. City Clerk Renteria, I am here. Finance and Administrative Services Director Horner,
Here.
Fire Chief Anderson, Police Chief Escalera, Public Works Director Fisher,
I'm here.
Commander Bailey,
I'm here. All right, thank you, Madam City Clerk. All right, active agenda for tonight's workshop. We'll get started with the first item, the employee reception meet and greet. That's the amendment.
So I'm actually going to have Jackie bring up the flyer we've created, and it will have the two items A and items B on it. These are the community forums that we want to have with our citizens. And so we will have the employee meet and greet on April 21st from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the community center. This is meant for employees to be able to come and talk to citizens, and we're hoping to put an emphasis on new employees that have been hired since the pandemic and haven't had a chance to come to council and be introduced. So this will be also an opportunity for council to meet those employees. So we will notice this meeting, and then the next items are community forums, and they will be in a roundtable format. And we will have 3 council members, more than likely rotate amongst you. And you'll sit at a table and people will be able to come and talk to you and tell you what their business needs are, what their neighborhood needs are, and what they feel would be help for our city. So we wanted to have 3 different community forums. They're each one of them in a different location, and each of them at a different time. Hopefully to accommodate all citizens that want to participate to actually be able to come at a time that works for them. So our first one will be May 17th from noon to 1 at the community center. And the second one will be from 4:30 to 6:30, June 21st at City Hall. And the last one will be June 23rd, 10 a.m. to noon at the fire department. And so we want to make sure that the citizens know this is your time to sit down with city council. If you don't want to come to a city council meeting and get your 3 minutes, this is your chance to sit down with myself, with the police chief, or his representative, the fire chief or his representative, and then people from Public Works and our Public Works director. So this is the chance for our community to start talking to us about what they see, what they feel is important. And I think this is going to be something that will evolve as we get done. And then when this is done, we're going to take the results. And at each table will be a little questionnaire that they fill out, and they can turn it in anonymously. They don't have to put their name on it. And then they can say, this is what I want to make sure is heard. When we get done with that, then as a council, we'll hold a meeting of all of us and have a session where we work through the perceptions and the needs that the community is expressing to us. So I think that it's really important for us to have these, especially with the climate that's going on in our city. I said it before. Great. So we know that there are just a handful of people that are causing the problems in our city right now, and we're 20,000 strong. We need to get those people on our side and talking to us about what we need to do to work together to get our city being the beautiful place we know it is. So that is our community forums. Our last night out, and last item is National Night Out. So I mentioned it briefly at the last meeting, but I want to make sure that I can answer any questions that anyone has. We're going to take it from the Central Park and move it into 4 different neighborhoods and do them 1 a week over the month of August. And it will actually, a flyer is going to be passed out individually to homes in that neighborhood. And you'll need to have that flyer to get in. We want to make sure that these National Night Out organizations and these organized barbecues are for the neighborhood to meet your neighbor. If you don't know your neighbor, you're not going to necessarily feel comfortable going over and talking to them about maybe their barking dog, or maybe, you know, hey, your kid's kind of driving by fast in this little car. So I think that these are the kind of things that if you can meet your neighbor and talk to them and say, you know, hey, I noticed your fence is kind of falling down. Do you want some help getting it back up? I think those are the kind of conversations we need to start having in our neighborhoods. And we also will have a National Night Out celebration as part of that in that neighborhood. So we will still bring the free hot dogs and hamburgers and have the police and fire there and have the same kind of elements. We'll have some games, have park and rec there. But we really want to take this back to the neighborhoods. And then on the actual day of National Night Out, we are going to offer the swimming pool for free all day, so kids can still go swimming and celebrate. And we will do fireworks in the park. It just won't be a big organized 4,000 or 5,000 people here. So we just wanted you guys to be aware of that and let you know this is another way for us to try to get people back in their neighborhoods and understanding the problems and getting us talking to them. So that's what I have on those items. And so I've kind of put you down to D.
You just move this right along. First, I'm going to give council members an opportunity to ask you some questions. We're going to go down the list. And we're going to start with Councilor Hart. Do you have any questions for Ms. Alla on either of these items?
Actually, no, but I'm very excited about this. I think that having gotten away from the neighborhood block parties themselves, it has been kind of a sad state. And I'm really excited that we're going to be able to bring those back, in as much that That's how you get to know your neighbors, get to know your neighbors, know the neighbors' cars, know the neighbors' kids, know when they're having company, when they're having, just so that you know that if their car is not there, the car that is there is supposed to be there. I thought those things are really important, and that's how we protect our neighbors and protect ourselves. So I'm really pleased about this. I think this is the right way to move. And I found my 25 anniversary night out T-shirt, so I'm ready to go. Start in my neighborhood first. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Hicks.
They said they're gonna break block parties down to 4 groups, basically.
Correct, it'll be in 4 different neighborhoods. And
They can break it down per street. We've always did our own street.
Excuse me, Mr. Hicks? Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
could you please speak up?
Wait, you need to pull your mic forward.
Thank you.
Anyway, like I was saying, we always did our own individual street party instead of a whole quarter of the city.
And you're more than welcome to continue to do it that way if you'd like to. The city would provide you with the hot dogs and the hamburgers and the hamburger buns and stuff. But in order to make sure we have enough personnel to cover the 4 different neighborhoods, we want to make sure that we have that organized and we're mobilized for that. And we want to reach out to more than just one street.
Get that.
Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to agree with my colleague, Ms. Hart. This is a great opportunity for the city. I really appreciate the work that staff has done on this, and I'm looking forward to the community forums.
Oh, absolutely.
And Councilor Ripley.
Do we know what 4 areas it's gonna be in?
Officer Otero is in charge this year, and he is going to target the neighborhoods that have had the most, basically most violence and the most drive-by shootings and the things that we've seen. Those are the neighborhoods that are really feeling it. So we want to make sure that we've had those people an opportunity to get together and start talking about what they want to have happen in their neighborhood.
I think that's a great idea.
Councilor Farmer.
I think it's a great idea. It's something we haven't done. And sometimes we do the same old stuff, you get the same old results. And I'm looking forward to this. I think that increased presence of our city, police and fire in neighborhoods is nothing but great. I'm happy to see it. I'm glad for the work that's been put into it. Thank you.
And Councilor Wheeler.
Well, I'm really glad that we're doing this. It'd be nice to get people in the city involved. Let them know what we're doing, what they can do to help each other. So, sounds like a fantastic idea.
Thank you. And my comments would be that, most of the comments thus far have been on the National Night Out item, and I would agree with my colleagues on that. I'm excited about this. When the idea was brought up to me a week or so ago, I was pretty pumped about it. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a positive change, and I think the community actually does want to be involved. On the other 2 points, on community forums, item B, I think that is a fantastic opportunity. We've had, if you've been paying attention to Facebook at all, you've been seeing all sorts of comments on Facebook, and as city council members, we receive phone calls, emails, texts, and all that sort of things from people around town. This gives an opportunity for people to come to city leaders, department heads, and voice their concerns. And these are the things that we need to be looking at. I mean, we are here to serve the community. This gives us an opportunity to hear what it is that's on their minds in an open forum, and getting that information via Facebook. I don't like that as much. I prefer the face-to-face conversation. You get a little better feedback. I don't ever answer anything on Facebook. I read it and try not to answer it. I don't think it heads in a good direction it heads in a bad direction very quickly, I think it's better to say. So I like to have a conversation. Item A, employee reception. I'm excited about this. Over the last 2 years, we've hired a lot of new people. And a lot of those people I've not yet met, and I'm pretty sure that that is true for other council members as well. So I look forward to meeting them and welcoming them to the employee in the city. And I just like to know who I'm talking to when I see a city employee on the street and do going about their business, whether it be water or street or whoever. I'd like to have seen them before, so I'm looking forward to that. So, all right, thank you, everybody. Next item. Item D, policing Sunnyside presentation. Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Boersma. Tonight we have a presentation by our police department, and I will turn it over to Chief Escalada to start us off.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First of all, I just want to
According
start
to
off.
an Alexa Answers contributor, Ibn Battuta was a Moroccan explorer during the 14th century. He was famous for his travels throughout the Islamic world and as far as China. Did that answer your question?
It sure did. That's really the end of my presentation this evening. Thank you so much for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen of council, we are here today to present to you a presentation that we have provided to our Public Safety Council about 2 weeks ago. So this is basically a little bit better version of what we provided, but we are going to speed through some of it. Some of it we're going to slow down a little bit in order to drive a few points home and kind of let you know what's going on and our approach to dealing with what's going on here in the city. So the first thing that we definitely want to talk about is to make you aware of what's actually occurring in the Sunnyside area, so that you have a better understanding as to where we really stand when facing crime. So if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so the current issues that are facing Sunnyside Police Department in our community, they really stem around violent crime more than anything else. We have other crimes that do occur within our jurisdiction and within our community. However, none that are compared to the crime that we're seeing today. We are currently facing shootings, homicides, gang violence and graffiti, robbery. And those are your primary things that are really working against us right now as a community. And like I said, we have additional things that are going on, but nothing that's not very unmanageable like we're seeing today on these 4 areas that we have here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of touch base on each one of these things. On the right side of the particular slide, you see recent legislation, staffing and equipment, mental health contacts, traffic management. All those are challenges. All those are things that hinder our abilities to provide services to our community as they know it. So the community got very used to things as they should have, right? They got very used to how the police handle things, how we responded to particular calls, and what we at times can or cannot do with particular calls. And so much of that has been uprooted and changed as of July 25th, 2021. So we've been working in this very restricted enforcement environment, which has caused a significant amount of increase in crime. As an opportunist or a bad person learns, right, they tend to implement the things that benefit them, and they will challenge the system. And so the more that they challenge this, obviously, the more emboldened they become, and it becomes problematic for you and I as citizens out here trying to enjoy a community or trying to grow a community. It makes it very difficult for us all across the board. So with that, we're gonna kind of dive into this thing. But I just wanted to let you know that these are kind of the primary areas we're going to discuss. So the next slide, please. Next slide shows weapons violations over about 11 years, 10 years, basically. And this is basically the Sunnyside gunfire incidents year to date. When we discuss gunfire incidents, we're not talking about people who call in gunfire incidents. We show up to a scene, we don't find anything, right? Could have been a backfire on a vehicle, could have been fireworks or a firecracker or something of that nature. This does not record any of that. These are absolute and true founded firearms or evidence of firearm violence or potential violence with evidence disclosed and located. So we recovered casings, we have found damage to either houses, cars, persons, animals, things of that nature. So this is where we truly have a gunfire incident, and it's certainly worth noting and reporting. As you see in 2011, we have 12 incidents that basically show the 3-month period that we're talking basically from January 1st of any particular year that you see up there up till today. Okay, so that is from January 1st to today. And all of these comparisons reflect the numbers that we have here that are indicated at the top of each one of these red lines. So at the height of our violence back in that started probably around 2009, right around there, and then extended through 2011 and calming down in 2012. We had 12 shootings in that reported period. And if you scan over to 2022, we have 32. Excuse me, please, I put glasses on, can't see me. We have 32 in that particular period. That is extreme. That is extreme. We have not seen that here ever in the history of recording shootings in the city limits of Sunnyside and in the history of the city of Sunnyside. We have not seen it. Okay, so what we had to do is basically implement some current tactics that we are using today in order to attempt to thwart some of this and calm some of this down. But the things that we're using today are not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. We can't hold on to the way we're doing business right now. I'll give you an example. For the month of March, I had scheduled 276 hours of overtime for our folks. That was pre-scheduled prior going into March, and we got them going 276 hours. These are people working 18-hour shifts. They are working on their days off. It is absolutely unsustainable. We can't hold on to that. But at the same time, it was fruitful for almost 3 weeks, and then the shootings began again, right? Then they started coming back out. And so not every day are we covered as heavy as we'd like to be. So the name of the game is consistency with staffing. However, we don't have that. We don't have that here. We'll get into staffing later on this evening. So the gunfire incidents we have increased 357% from 2021. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. That just gives you that number, and that's a number that your citizens need to know that we have increased 357% in violent shootings here in the city of Sunnyside. That is something that, again, it is out there ever since that July 25th deadline hit. They have been getting people becoming more educated and more emboldened and this is where we're at today. Okay, so accountability is certainly needed.
Also, one thing I'd like to add is starting here in the mid-90s, we had the violence, the gang violence that we had in the 90s. But I want everyone to understand that this is most definitely a cyclic problem. Okay, it's not an isolated event, but the problem is that now we're faced with a couple of additional factors that are compounding the issues that we're facing. So we had the increased violence in the mid-90s. We had the increased violence in 2010, 11, and 12. We're now facing that again, but we're also compounding that with the fact that legislative changes have occurred, and we're we're facing considerable amounts of retirements. So those are just some of the things to look at in totality.
So since October 1st of 2021, next slide, please. I'm going to pass out this slide so it makes it easier for you to see. So that way you guys have a color copy for yourself. There have been 53 gunfire incidents since October 1st of 2021. Okay, that's when we really started to see things spike, was in October of last year. And then it continued and continued, and here we are today at a record number of shootings. We just don't recall so many, and no people have current or past records of anything that exceeds this amount or even comes close to it. So what you see there are the red dots. The red dots are all of the shots fired calls that we've responded to. And you also see some clustering in there. And the clustering is just, it's kind of more notable just because you'll see them in those areas. And so really the plan is when you take a look at the city here, we're going to have to break the city down into 3 zones. And so we've kind of done that. And now the city's broke down into 3 zones. Now we're going to be able to work at working on locations and also people at the same time. And so we'll get into that in a minute, but we have to be able to take this by small bites at a time because we don't have the staffing that's really after the second needs get done. So we're going to have to locate those areas that are most problematic and become very focused on those areas as opposed to people. People will show up in the areas that are affected. They just will gravitate there. It's just their business. It's where they're going to be. The only thing you don't have is the crystal ball, right? We don't have that crystal ball that tells us when they're actually going to be there. So we do have to emphasize in the areas that tend to attract the majority of the criminal activity. And as you can see here, it is sporadic throughout the city. It does have its locations. It does have certain locations in there that are clustered, and gives us some ideas and some ways to work on this. So, is there any questions so far to this point?
Council members, any questions? And those council members on Zoom, I encourage you to speak up if you have questions. Any questions, carry answer.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So I guess now you're kind of wondering what our approach is to this. How are we going to tackle some of this problem or the majority of this problem? Well, I do want to start off at the top of this slide. It does say when addressing violent crime of this magnitude, there is no single policing model that is effective independently, and that is an absolute fact. Okay, there is, you won't find a police chief or criminal expert or scholar anywhere that's going to tell you that one particular model is going to take care of your problems. And violent crime and some other crimes that are not violent, but they are systemic. So that is what we had to look at. That is something that we had to begin putting together and see what's going to be best for our city at the moment. And we've identified these particular bullet items that you see up there. And so with the permission of the city manager, I'd like to pass out our community operations and safety plan. This is something that I gave to the public safety committee a couple of weeks ago that you folks don't have. That kind of gives you just some very brief descriptions of each one of those bullets. So we're not having to go through that this evening, but it at least gives you something to read. So with your permission, we can do it. Yeah, just some light reading. Yeah, and it is quite light actually. So in each one of these, you have multiple models approach. It has to be integrated to successfully reduce criminal activity. And that was the goal. And we have practiced that here in the past. However, what we currently are doing is working. So what we currently do now is we have officers that come on shift. They get ready for the day.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Sorry, Chief. Could you send that to me and Ms. Hart via email?
It looks as if our clerk is getting right on that, Mr. Susie. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So how we currently work with these, you have officers that come in and they get ready for their day. There is pass on, which is information that they swap. Just to let the day shift know, let the night shift know what day shift needs to know, and vice versa, what day shift needs night shift to know. They pass this information on and they go out there. And oftentimes, they already have calls stacked up and they're waiting for them before they get to the door. And so they get to the door and they start responding to calls, some minor, some major, and some in between. But the fact of the matter is they continue to act in a reactive mode. And when you're acting in a reactive mode, it's kind of what is semi-expected. And I think that's what people kind of get used to, or what their perception as a policeman is what they do is strictly reactive, and that's not true. But if you want to take care of things, if you want to address things, it has to be proactive. We have to be able to put ourselves ahead of the game in order to do what it is what we have to do in order to calm some of these situations down. But reactive, it just means exactly that. You're reacting to something that somebody is already victim, right? They're victimized, they're done. Whatever the issue is, whether they had somebody break into their home or someone steal from Walmart or something worse, they're a victim of an assault or possibly killed in the process of whatever. So those things are all relatively reactive. And so we're trying to get away from that as much as we can with what we have to work with. And in this particular slide, you do see these primary bullet points here. And risk-based policing is exactly that. That's where you're going to be focusing on places as opposed to people. However, you're going to be using risk terrain modeling. Risk terrain modeling is what is it that is attracting people to these particular areas. So we have overgrown trees, torn down fences. What is it that we have that could be improved in order to improve the safety of the community? So we have to look at that. There's no doubt about that. Something is drawing that to us. And what is that draw? It's not only people, but it is location. And so we have to be able to cut that back and start working on that. Focused deterrence investigations, that is people. That is strictly people. And that's where each person has basically a score. And so the score is the likelihood of offending. And so we have to be able to know that to some degree. Now, when you sit with us and you sit in a room with a bunch of intelligence flying around and people's faces up on boards and things of this, we can just about tell you without any mathematical certainty, right, who's going to offend, who's not. Okay, we don't need algorithms to tell them. We just know, right? Because we dealt with these folks enough. And our officers are very good about saying, this person, that person, they can almost prioritize for you with certainty. However, these two models that I just talked about work with algorithms. They work with science that backs it up, and the likelihood of things happening in particular locations and the likelihood of an offender striking. Okay, so that's what these two models. It's a little bit of things that we definitely need to operate off of in order to focus our efforts on growing the issue. Collaboration. You'll see collaboration in there. These are the individuals that we plan on working with, the agencies that we plan on working with, the federal partners, all of them. And so I have that listed there for you. Traffic management is exactly that in order to reduce and get some speed calming out here. And try to work on reducing the collision picture, but at the same time, you definitely want to utilize this as a tool for collecting data. So we want to collect data on individuals coming in Sunnyside, leaving Sunnyside, leaving particular areas, coming in particular areas. And so that becomes very fruitful for us. The community outreach, education, and mobilization is huge. That will be one of the biggest things that will basically win the game. And first thing is outreach. We do have to make sure that we continue our festivals and things that we do, let people know that, hey, you come out and have coffee with a cop, you can do those kinds of things, and we want you to do those kinds of things. So they have to know that we do care and Sunnyside does care. and the police department cares. And so we definitely want to engage in that proactive way. Another proactive way is education. You'll see that in the report as well. And education is that is to have forums, is to have town hall meetings, and we're going to start that here very soon. And that's where we focus, and we narrow the focus of the person who is joining us in those meetings. And we don't want it to be a complaint section in the sense that, hey, how come you guys did this? How come you did that to my family? Whatever it may be. That isn't the nature. However, a few minutes for them to do that in out of their system, because it's going to happen. You can't avoid it, but you can control the amount of time that it happens, or for how the duration of it. And then we move right into the educational piece. And one of the first things that will be put out there is that crime in communities, doesn't matter whether it's Sunnyside, it doesn't matter, Los Angeles, I don't care. Those are societal issues. Those are not policing problems. Those are society problems. And so society has to take a step forward in doing their part and taking care of business and reducing crime. And so that's where that education piece comes in. The mobilization piece is really putting the public to work. And that is what we cut into volunteerism when we get into the watch, the hawk watches, things of that nature. So that's where you'll see that. And then we're also going to request the input from the community and see what it is that they think they can do to help us, because they may have some great ideas that we just don't know of. So we're going to let them jump in on that. So that's huge. That's going to be probably the most effective tool that we're going to have, is working those two top models with that particular model right there. City resources is another that is working with all city resources that we have here, with fire, with code enforcement, with everyone under the sun, that we can gather within the things that within the resources that we have here in the city. One of the things that we had prior was back in 2019, I believe it was. We had code enforcement assigned to us prior to that. We had Officer Driscoll was assigned to the police department. That there proved extremely valuable. That was just amazing to have code enforcement with us and on those runs, because what they really focused on were the larger picture. They didn't always go after the signs. I understand that, the weeds and things. I get that totally, because that is an issue here. But they also look for places that were unsuitable, right? That you can't, that there are things that you drive by every day that you don't realize are there. And so when we hit search warrants and we did things like that, and we went in to help people one way or the other, we're able to use them to come in and assist us in enforcing tools, or as an enforcement tool, also as a great tool against gangs, right? So that is just something that they don't like, is us interfering with them in any way, shape, or form. And when you got the city that's coming in and taking a bite out of it through code enforcement, that's a different authority entirely, and that really proves very well for all of us. And it's a great partnership, and it has worked extremely well, and it works extremely well in many other communities. So that is something that we'll be requesting from council to certainly consider. The last area is the expansion of the authorized strength of the Sunnyside Police Department. 2 weeks ago, when I had the Public Safety Committee in the conference room, we sat and discussed this. They were taking a look at our staffing that we currently have, where we were in the past, where we are now, and where we're going in the future. And it's, I think they would all say it's pretty alarming, at best. It just was not a good report card. And so the expansion of the authorized strength of this agency has to happen, because what ends up happening is that we see 29 people at all times. And when you see that, as it becomes a cap in their own mind, so that's, we don't need to go further than that. And it becomes very restrictive to growth. Though your city is growing, but your police department, your fire departments aren't, right? They're not keeping up in public safety. And so as well as public safety entities also have to grow with the community in order to address the needs and service the public as they deserve for service. So that's another one of those things, and we'll get into staffing here. So along with that whole mess comes recruitment and retention. We are absolutely losing personnel. We are losing personnel to other departments. Departments that offer more resources to lessen their workload, departments that have take-home cars, departments that have more avenues to go to, right? More things to do, more specialties in the law enforcement profession than what we offer here. And they offer more pay. And so, and the extent of that is extreme. I mean, these folks are getting contacted via social media, telephone calls, and visits at their home. Okay, so you got other departments going, their houses showing up, brand new equipment saying, you need to be sitting on your arm seat. Yeah, pretty hard on our crew, right, to be looking at that and listening to what these folks are getting for doing the same job. But they aren't as worked, you know, they don't have the caseload that they do here, nor do they have the overtime as much as they do there. And so it's a very easy sell, and they know, our neighboring agencies know the quality of hiring that we get. They know the quality of training that we provide and the quality of experience that our officers have. And they are basically a training ground for them. They know that once that kind of established, they're coming after it. And when they've been successful, and they're, you know, our folks are jumping ship on these different departments. So recruitment and retention has to be part of your plan, you know, in order to hold our folks, especially in such a challenging environment that we face today. Okay. Next slide, please. Graffiti. All of you have seen graffiti throughout our city. You have seen it in, you know, you see it in small amounts, you've seen it in large amounts, you've seen it everywhere. And that has increased significantly since July 25th. Now, we've always had graffiti in the city. That's nothing new to us. What's new to us is the amount, right? Is the amount of graffiti that we're seeing. You know, what's new to us is the amount of action being taken via the communication of that graffiti. So I'm going to have Scott talk about that in just a moment. But this is truly where code enforcement, that person comes in and assists us. Scott's going to talk a little bit about the reporting and how sometimes we're losing the numbers. Some of that is being moved over to the planning side, not to the police department side, so we're not able to provide you a proper number as to how many of these types of things that we investigate because they're no longer under our purview. So he's going to discuss that. However, it is extremely prevalent through our neighborhoods and our business districts, and that is a high form of communication for them. That is a primary form of communication. So I'll talk to you. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Chief. As you can see with this collage, the two photographs on the far left, top and bottom, are obviously the same apartment complex. The difference between them is you can see that they are constantly being written over. That's, as we indicated previously, that this is a means of communication. And it's basically a situation where the last one there wins. So they constantly cross out their competitors, put their own information there. Meanwhile, code enforcement is coming in and or the property owners are coming in and taking it off, which only provides them with an ample canvas to start over. So that's one of the situations that we look at. Now, if you look a little bit further to the right, both on the bottom, on the right side there, those are both the exact same image. The only difference is that you can see on the far right, there's a red line that's drawn all the way through. Basically, they're crossing it out. They're sending a signal to the person, to the BGL, the Bell Garden locals that have tagged there to begin with. They're drawing, and BGLs happen to be a surrendering gang. The red line indicates that it is most likely a Norteño, which is a red set, and are marking out the territory of the initial person putting it there. And all we're doing is beginning a battle for territory. This is a way to let everybody know that we have now claimed this, and this doesn't stop. As you can see, it doesn't matter whether it's public property, private property. You can see the up there on the top in the center, we have the bridge on Stackhouse, and then some other some markings from the alleyway. But the one thing in common is it's based on color, it's based on gang identifiers, and then they're showing that it's crossed out and someone else is taking over. The significant information that we've lost, or can't say totally lost, it's been diminished since code enforcement left, is the open communication and the tracking of information through the reporting to Sunnyside. In speaking with the code enforcement officers, it's my understanding that they're tracking their information in a separate RMS or records management system, and we now you have people calling in with information, but they also find their own. So now our numbers aren't centralized anymore. It's skewed as far as we know. But the other aspect to this is the loss of networking and communication and sharing information on what, and as you can see, this is a foreign language to most people. It takes time to pick up the signs, the information that's in there, and to share that information. And the lack of, or the inability to do that is hindering the sharing of information a bit.
And if I could chime in for just a second there, I just want everybody to know with current laws the way they are, as of July 25th, 2021, we are not allowed to question juveniles without an attorney. So you can't just stop off and talk to somebody who's walking away from this and ask him a question if he's juvenile. You just hand it off. So just to let you know that that's the kind of tool that's taken away from you, right? It's that kind of common sense. It's just your basic crime fighting issue. One of the tools that we've been so successful with in the past, that's a walk away for them. Right there. We can't. So just as an FYI.
So and the as I was saying, with these are basically billboards. Okay, they're renting space, and they are sharing their ideas, their ideologies to the detriment of our community. And it's their way of sharing information back and forth. But the partnership that we face, or that we have with with code enforcement, with patrol, and with our street crimes unit, as they get started here, is the teamwork and the avenues of communication, the sharing back and forth to ensure that we find areas that are, we know that code enforcement is going out and cleaning a specific area. We can now work a focused effort onto a specific area that's a clean canvas, and then perhaps we can catch the individuals in. But this is the systemic, or this is the seed that leads into the violent activity that goes on further. Next slide. Any questions on that? I know
I was
there's
just
a
going
lot
to
of.
say, let's take a break and give council members an opportunity to ask some questions. Council members, do we have any questions?
Yeah, obviously this is a Sunnyside problem. Is it bigger than that?
Absolutely.
It is huge, and this is, not only is it systemic throughout the valley, it is prolific throughout the valley. It is as fast as you can be, it's going to put it right back up. And so it's, if you drive around just outside go up onto Van Bellen or someplace like that, very, very close to the cemetery, or either side of it, you'll see there's buildings and warehouses, wareboxes, all that, they are coded. They're absolutely riddled with gang activity and this type of graffiti. But every bit of that, we were up there this weekend, we were up there on Saturday looking around outside of our city limits on Saturday afternoon, and it's exactly what we're seeing. It's just everywhere. So the gang presence is extremely strong throughout the valley.
Further questions?
Yes, I have a couple. Should citizens report graffiti to the police department or the code enforcement?
Well, that's, I guess I would leave that question to the city manager in terms of who, obviously it reported to us and we will get it to them. But it all depends on where she is wanting us to have that information centralized. So if it's obviously it's a crime, if they report it to us, if you're a victim, we'll take that information. But then it's also being found and resolved by code enforcement. So I think it's a split deal. It's a matter of whatever the preference is, and we'll be more than happy to comply.
And that's currently what's happening, is they're calling both City Hall and the police department at the moment. And both react, they both respond to it.
And then we talked about, you talked about juveniles and not being able to talk to them without an attorney present. So you want to talk to a juvenile, let's say you caught a juvenile, spraying graffiti. Can you hold him, or can you bring him into the police station, but you just can't talk to him until he has an attorney present?
If you can catch him in that, where you're actually seeing it happen, and you see the individual, you get him or her, whoever may be in the evidence that you are going to collect, you do exactly that. You can bring him in, hold, you have to call the parent, you have to call the attorney, and that can be done.
What about a citizen witnessing a juvenile spraying? Is that enough to bring him in? If citizens saw him do
If the citizen can positively ID the individual, you got some teeth. But can you bring them in to do it? It might be a different story there.
Still doesn't give you the ability to question without your contact.
I understand that.
We would more than likely handle that based, there's somewhere like the SROs do, is they basically make appointments to get people together to sit and chat about certain things that go on in school behavior. It's kind of what we would do out here, something like that. There are times we can't, if it's solid enough and recent enough, yeah, we might be able to just bring that individual down here and do the exact same thing. Just call the parents, call the attorney, and see what they thought.
And if you were to get cameras, is that a good enough eyewitness? If they were able to identify whoever was doing the graffiti?
Yeah, I think resolution would have to be top notch. I mean, you'd have to have some nice resolution to do it, and that would be forwarded to a prosecutor for somebody.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I think that probably we have to do
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, Ms. Hart, do you have questions?
No questions, Mr. Mayor. Good presentation. Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Carry on.
Okay, on this page here is mental health challenges. This is a very difficult one for us to overcome. And it's not just for Sunnyside Police, it's for the police department in the state of Washington or anywhere in the United States. It is highly problematic as it is a legal challenge for us to deal with. They are not necessarily conforming and not necessarily people that you put in the general population, or are they necessarily people that shouldn't be in jail. And so that Scott's going to discuss the faults and things like that here in a minute about how we handle this, but at the end of the day, we have an increased number of mental health contacts on a daily basis now than we ever had. And a lot of that comes from that broad stroke that everybody has some mental condition or something, or mental crisis at the moment. So we have to be very careful on how we approach those things, and when we bring them to jail, how we deal with them. So I'll let Scott talk about that and some of the substitute house bills that have changed that, kind of give us a little bit more teeth. So for that, Scott.
Thank you, Chief. Last year on July 25th, 2021, legislation came sweeping in that very much restricted what law enforcement can do, the uses of force, and what our scope of authority was. Quite a bit of, through further discussion and some of the understanding that's come out, they've come out with a substitute House Bill 2037 that's provided a considerable amount of latitude, especially in dealing with Terry stops that we'll deal with a little bit later, but also in addressing mental health, dealing with folks with mental health, and RCW 77 in terms of, and RCW 71 in terms of the what we call ITAs, or Involuntary Treatment Act. And that is, it now provides us the ability to use force in order to take a person into custody, if necessary, to be evaluated by a mental health professional, which has recently been designated as a DCR, or designated crisis responder. Last year, the legislation that came in basically told us that we would rather you leave than get into a confrontation. And we actually have done that just prior to the situation, the passing of the laws here earlier this last month, where we were out and had we were dealing with a barricaded subject for probably about 2.5 hours, had blocked the road off. It was, of course, it's never a fair weather day. It was cold, it was windy, and we were out there for about 2.5 hours dealing with and working through every avenue of resources that we had. The Yakima Police Department had sent a couple of dogs down. They had additional personnel on standby for us. The Sheriff's Office was there. We had a designated crisis responder on the scene, and we could not work through the problem enough to get us into a situation where we could take the individual into custody. So we stepped aside. Oh, and he was armed. So these new laws have changed. It has provided us a great deal of avenue, or new avenues to work through, and a lot of the tools back into our toolbox. But the one thing that we need to understand is this is not going away. With the additional changes in legislation and the rulings of the Washington State Supreme Court, it has limited the what legal drugs are and what are illegal. And the majority of the folks that we come in contact with have what's referred to as a chemically induced psychosis, which means that it's driven by drugs. And they have reduced the amount of it. It's no longer, mere possession is no longer a criminal act. And that only means that we are going to face more and more and more of this as time goes on. And in dealing with that, running on behalf of the side of the jail, we have considerable problems in housing these individuals because, as the chief indicated, they can't sustain social interaction in general population. They are, we have to keep them in segregated housing. And this jail was built with a total of 1 segregation cell. The remaining cells that we use for that purpose are actually holding cells, which means that the requirements for observation and evaluation have to go up considerably because they don't have interaction through intercoms and things like that, which means that we have to check on these individuals, at a minimum on half-hour intervals, most likely on 15-minute intervals. So it becomes very time intensive. In addition to that, most of these individuals are not taking their medications as they should be. We now take them and place them into a confined space, which becomes a pressurized vessel. And the likelihood that a physical confrontation is going to happen increases exponentially day by day as they continue to degrade, not having medications. We have worked very well with comprehensive healthcare in the past. We've on not only treatment for mental health here in the facility, but also in terms of trying to think of the plan, but hub and spoke program, reducing people off of opioids and things like that to provide additional resources out there. But the problem is that it eventually they have such turnover that the programs get lost. So the things to remember here, in fact, we had an officer one of our corrections officers was kicked in the face this weekend, just putting a person into, just trying to get a guy into a van to transport him up the avenue. So and we all know that in Cracker Jack boxes, the little, the puzzles, the number puzzles where you have one space that's empty and as you move the numbers, everything works great. Well, if we have two spaces, that's a very advantageous position for us. We can move people out of general population. We can separate those folks that get into trouble in the jail. If we have one space, it reduces our ability to do that greatly because now we can only remove one person from general population. And if we have no space, we have no ability to control those things. So it's those are just some of the things that we're facing when it comes to housing with inmates. Plus, there is an increase in liability that just their general welfare that we need to be cognizant of at all times. In addition to that, in dealing with the court and in custody, we are constantly dealing with competency issues for the prosecution. These individuals, simply because they are found to be incapable of being prosecuted on this date, if they get in trouble in 2 weeks, then they have to be sent back up and evaluated at Eastern State Hospital again. And that means that for each time they're arrested, it's each time they have to be evaluated. It is not a blanket that says that you're incompetent or you're incapable of assisting with your defense. It is a case-by-case basis. That becomes labor intensive, travel intensive. We sometimes have to transport them up to Eastern State Hospital.
And I guess to conclude that is basically that we have a lack of professional resourcing here that can help us at any given time on the streets. We don't have that, and prescribed by law that's kind of one of the things that they really drove home, is to have these professionals out here during situations like Scott I talked about earlier. We had to stand off with the individual. We had a DCR that was there, that designated crisis responder, and that person was it's a mental health professional trying to talk this person down, whatever. That was very unsuccessful, but they tried. Yeah, but that is something that is prescribed in law, and so it is something that we see very little up here. So when we run into these situations, the majority of situations that we deal with are handled without them, because most of their calls for service, most of their demands come from the Upper Valley, and so which is going to be typical, but it's not something I don't think we need to settle with. I think that's something that is understood because the population is up there, but we are 35 minutes from that population. And any form of response that is an emergency or dire need for a mental health responder is, they're not allowed to speed. They don't got lights, they don't have things. They just gotta get there when they get there. And by that time, it's too late, or it could be too late. And so we have to consider a designated crisis responder that we hire here directly with the city police department, where we work with inmates in the jail, and also with the folks out on the street. And so that would be an amazing investment, really, and I think that other cities would probably want to jump on board with that. But it's just something we can talk about another day. So anyways, just kind of food for thought. Any questions on mental health?
Council members, questions on this item? Sorry, Mr. Suchi? Hearing none?
Good.
Hearing none? Oh, go
I'm
ahead,
good,
Mr.
Mr.
Suchi.
Mayor. I'm good,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Mayor.
you. All right, carry on, Chief.
Okay.
No
Next
questions.
question. Next slide, please.
I was switching on this one. It's this.
Legislative changes. I'm going to skim through this very quickly. Legislative challenges that we have now are House Bill 1310, House Bill 1054, Senate Bill 1054. I know that Deputy Mayor had requested this information as to which ones were problematic for us. Those two are your top ones that are kind of just off the top of your head. Right? Those are the ones that are most prevalent and affecting our enforcement abilities today. And there's quite a few others that are not listed in these slides, but right now these are the more problematic ones. The House Bill 1310 deals with the use of force and the restrictions that apply, and the Terry stops is basically your reasonable suspicion. So this is where you see somebody who they put out a burglary in progress, you get to the scene and you see an individual walking away from the residence and walk away, right? And so reasonable suspicion allows you to think more likely than not something had happened that potentially involved this individual. You go up to contact that individual and you run, and that person runs. That gives you the authority to chase that individual and bring them into custody and hold them until you verify the person's involvement. And if there is no involvement, you release them. And unless they have other issues as to why they ran, right? And if there is involvement directly, then you take that person into custody and you process accordingly. That has pretty much been for the last several months now, 6 months, 8 months, that's been gone. We didn't have that anymore. You had to actually have probable cause. So common sense is have a picture. And if you don't have a way to prove that at the very moment that you see them, then you can't touch them, and that crime goes unsolved. So that is problematic for us. That is huge. Terry stops. Okay. Now the substitute House Bill 1735 has changed here within the last couple of weeks. And so that is now providing some latitude addressing the reasonable suspicion and allows us to detain with particular language. And it is problematic with traffic stops still. So if you stop somebody and you tell them why you made the stop, but initially you have to tell them that they're being detained and not free to leave. And if they decide to put that thing in drive and take off, you're restricted by the vehicle pursuit restrictions and you can't chase them. Even though they're detained, because they're using a vehicle to get away from you, you can't do anything about it. You gotta let it go. But if he bails out of the car and runs, you can chase him down. So the dynamics are out there. And those things do play against us in solving crime. So de-escalation tactics is nothing new to law enforcement. We've had that forever and a day. That's something that continues to be worked on, and we've worked through de-escalation. Part of the escalation tactics deals with your DCR. It does help to have somebody around that can help you diffuse issues before use of force actually becomes an issue. That de-escalation is something that guys do very good, and I'm very proud to say in our agency, we have very few hands-on incidents. Of the 14,000 law enforcement related events that we have, you're dealing with 1%, 2% maybe of those that we actually have to go hands-on with people. And in a way to physically subdue them, to take them to custody. And that is extremely good. That's extremely low. And so the majority of these guys pride themselves into talking people into their cars, talking them out of their cars, getting them to jail, sitting down, spending the time, de-escalating, defusing, and you may not talk to you, that's okay, but your job is done. And the public is, it's been safe, right? Things are safe at that point. So that's what House Bill 1310, one of our challenges. But it does have some latitude coming our way here.
So Senate Bill 1054 dealt with a lot of the restrictions in the types of weapons and techniques that law enforcement could use in order to take people into custody and reduce situations, potentially dangerous situations. One of the big things out of 1310 that the chief had mentioned earlier is a huge push on de-escalation and the requirement to use less lethal equipment in order to facilitate an arrest. However, the first thing that they did in House Bill or Senate Bill 1054 was claiming that all weapons over 50 caliber were considered military ordnance and had no business being used by law enforcement. Now, the interesting thing about that is a 12 gauge is actually 68 caliber, and it was the smallest platform for our less lethal equipment. So the less lethal kinetic energy impact projectiles, and beanbag rounds that we use are traditionally the 12 gauge as well as 37 millimeter. Both of those platforms were pulled out of the cars immediately upon signature. So in addition to that, it banned the use of neck restraints. We don't refer to chokeholds. Choking restricts airflow. Neck restraints typically uses the blood vessels and renders a person incapacitated due to that. Chemical weapon restrictions out in the street we're no longer allowed to use without the mayor's approval. Tear gas, it's still a viable option inside a correctional facility. So inside the jail we can, but they limited the accessibility to that. The interesting thing there is that I would much rather be exposed to tear gas than I would pepper spray. It clears out so much faster, and the decontamination time frame is considerably faster, but it's one of those things that we're faced with. And finally, the vehicle pursuit has been restricted to primarily what we refer to as BART felonies. They are violent felonies that are murder, robbery, arson, where there's a person involved or death, kidnapping, situations of that, or a DUI situation where the safety of the community is put at hand. Now, in dealing with all of those, Senate or Substitute House Bill 1719 has now recognized that it was an unintended consequence for the less lethal equipment, and they have opened the door that said that anything that is less lethal can be used for that purpose, regardless of the caliber of the equipment. So we are gaining some headway there and making some work, but again, it is restricted. Our pursuits, the amount of vehicle eluding and vehicle pursuits that we have had has easily quadrupled since the laws have changed, and now we're just letting them go. So as we know, People become conditioned. And as soon as they recognize that that's a factor that's occurring, they become more emboldened and they start to begin to see just how far they can move the line. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. Any questions there? I know we've given you guys a lot real quick, so.
Council, any questions on this item? Hearing none, what about our Zoom participants? Any questions there?
We're good, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
I'm good.
All right, carry on, sir.
Okay, next slide, please. Next slide concerns police staffing. So this is basically a reality check for you in the sense what you have covering your city on a daily basis and what it is that the type of officers per thousand that are dealing with, crisis in our city and trying to enforce law here. And so staffing is definitely one of our major issues that prohibits us from becoming proactive and taking care of things before they even begin, because we don't have adequate manpower. But in 2014, when I came here, that was 8 years ago, we had this many folks. We had 29 people in that 8 years. And I recall providing a presentation where we needed to increase the size of that department. So at that time, I had testified that we needed 36 people at that time. And so obviously that wasn't in the budget. So that wasn't a fly meeting, but the recommendation was to hire one person a year for 6 years. So every year you just hire a police officer to get that person on. And the purpose for that is to try to get them up to 36 is the magic number at that time. However, it doesn't account for retirements, people falling out, whatever they may be. So it takes a very long time. It takes more than 6 years to get 6 people. Because people, when they leave, now you're back down to 35, and 2 people go, now you're down to 33, and you keep dropping. But the one thing that can't be done, that is absolutely problematic, is hiring somebody who is turnkey ready, been ready to go to work for the city of Sunnyside on the city Sunnyside streets. It doesn't work like that. So just for your FYI, from the time that somebody is hired, from the time they are actually out here doing the job for you as a citizen, alone in their own patrol car making their own decisions, is a minimum of 1 year. So you have 1 year that person draws from our current resources to train. And if that individual does not make it in that year, then we're right back to square one. Okay, so they're not boom, it's not an automatic thing for us to replace. It just doesn't happen like that. So next slide, please. In the next slide shows our 2019 staffing, where we had 7 vacancies at that time. And so in that 7 vacancies, we had a couple of patrol sergeants, but we had more so in the workforce. That's really where you had it, is in patrol itself. And that's with 29 sworn positions right there. So in those 29 sworn positions, you basically, what you see here is what you had handling all the problems at that time would have been around 18,000 people that was residing here. The census says one thing, and we all know this, right? The census says one thing, and there are many people that are very reluctant to even participate in the census, and they don't like the government to know certain things. But in this particular city, we have multiple families living in the majority of the houses here. And so every time we respond to a house for anything, and we go inside, it's not one family, it's not 2, there oftentimes there's 3 plus families that reside there, both upstairs, downstairs kind of thing. Each room is rented to different people. It makes it very difficult, but it certainly skews our service numbers considerably. And so, next slide, please. Here we have 2019 staffing attrition. Here we have 9 eligible to retire. So the people that you see that are in the, we got a different slide here.
It's that one.
Staff, oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so The staffing attrition that you see there, the folks that you see in blue are able to retire at that time and basically give you the keys and turn on the lights and they can go tomorrow. The folks in red were vacant. Those are vacant positions that we have. And so that basically equates to 55% of Sunnyside Police Department's commission personnel that can either resign or retire. And just basically walk away and allow the retirements to sit. So the way police departments work and their retirement is once you have your 20 years invested. And so you may not be 53 years old yet to draw from it without penalty. However, you can just let it sit and not draw and walk away after 20 years and go to another career, another profession, own your own business, whatever, and wait till you're 53 and then draw. Okay, so that you have years of service, or you have both years and time, the time of grade. So you're either 53 in age, or you and having the years of service, or you just have years of service. So that's what you have. And so you also had 7 vacancies. So that's quite a bit right there. That's an awful lot. And if any more of those folks would have went out the door, then it would have been very, very hard to provide services in the city, if not impossible, if more than 3 or 4 of them. He's going to recover. Next slide, please.
And one thing I'd like to add with that is at the beginning of in the first quarter of 2020, we did lose a total of 8 people. We hired 8 people in 2020 to refill those slots, many of which are just getting out based on, issues behind COVID, with the law changes, the academy shutting down for the various reasons, and the changes in their academy style or curriculum. We have some that are just now getting out on the road, having completed their field training.
So on this slide here, we have fast forward to 2022, and this is our current commission position right now. This is what you see that services the city of Sunnyside at 25,000 people. We're estimating right between 22, 25,000 people. And that was basically agreed upon with our public safety committee. They agreed that we're more in that 25,000 range than we are at 23,000 range. And so what you see here is basically 5 vacancies is what you have. Now, even though you see the 2 purple positions are trainee and there's 2 people in those positions, but they're both a draw to resources. Neither one of them are eligible to be working on their own, and so they don't count, other than that they are drawing resources to train them and get them ready to go. So you basically have 5 positions again. That's there. Okay, that's just, we have 29. We have 29 officers, and so you really haven't changed or improved much. But this one here shows 30 sworn officer positions. It has 2 vacancies and 2 new hires, and that's really what you're looking at right here. We were the council gave us 1 extra for this year, so they gave us that last year, but they funded it for this year for 1 extra body. That gives us 30. So that's kind of what you see. There's obviously a lot of mix going on. There's no holes that we haven't shown you yet, but that's what you have.
In addition to that, I'd like to say that once we were given the additional position, we were actually fully staffed for 13 days. So as soon as we hired the newest officer at that time, they came on board. It was about the same time as the law changes. We had one of the senior officers walk in and hand us a letter of resignation the day after, and he was, or the day before, excuse me. So we were actually fully staffed for 13 days.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is where you're going to see what really services the city. The police officers per 1,000 population, the national average of officers that should be policing cities, municipalities, is 2 to 2.5 officers per 1,000 population. And that is pretty generic throughout the country. Now, there's places like New York, places like Detroit, Chicago, all those areas that that require a higher need because of the population, the density that they have. They have a higher need. However, they still play catch up. They still have to at least strive for 3 to 3.5 officers per 1,000 if they can get. For us, we are operating at 2.5 is what we are shooting for. And in this particular slide, it shows that we're currently serving a population of 18,000 people. And that was back in 2014, and about 2016, right around there, when we had that population. And it obviously has been growing pretty steady ever since. However, with 30 officers, and that includes myself, that includes commanders, that is 30 officers equals 1.6 officers per 1,000. Okay, so you're below by, by 4/10. You're still down. You're still down. But if you were at 34 officers, that equals 1.8 officers per 1,000. 36 equals 2 officers per 1,000. So that's kind of the magic number at that time. If you're going to service 18,000 people, you should have 36 officers to do that. That's the bottom, right? That's where you should be operating from down here and then working your way up as the years go on. And you can see with 39 officers equals 2.1 officers per 1,000. But to bring reality to this, next slide, please. To bring reality to this is you have patrol officers per 1,000 population of 18,000 people. Now, you have 16 officers that realistically respond to calls and handle SRO duties. That's what you have out here. 16 that handles right now 25, but for this particular example, we're using 18,000. So with 16 officers to include SROs and sergeants, you are operating at 0.88 officers per 1,000. So you're below 1. You're below 1 officer per 1,000. Your squad average on any given day out here, Sunday through Monday, all the way through from Sunday to Sunday, basically, is you have about 3.5 officers out here a day. That's what you have on a 12-hour shift. You have 3.5 officers, and from the hours of 6 to 6, and then you have 3.5 officers operating from 6 to 6 at night. Okay, so when you look at that, 3.5 officers per shift equals 0.19 officers per 1,000. You can almost see that it's thin. You hardly have any coverage out here at all at any given time, any given day of the week. It's that thin. And the only time that we're able to bolster those numbers is when we pay overtime. Right, so we have to actually call people in on the days off or to hold them over from one shift to the other in order to make that happen. So you have to do that. But
My microphones are on.
our people are pretty burned up. So the next slide, please. The next slide shows us serving a population of 25,000. So we have servicing a population of 25,000 people. And in this instance here, you see the exact same thing. If you went up to from 30 to 41, your numbers don't change that much, right? With the officer per 1,000, you don't have much of a change at all. There's no magic number that will catch you there. But for you to service 25,000 people, you would need 50 officers to be two officers per 1,000. And so that's a lot. I mean, that's a significant deficit that we operate on a daily basis. So next slide, please. Your patrol officers per 1,000. Didn't work. No. Okay. So here again, you're at 16 officers to include SROs, you're at 0.64 officers per thousand. And on your squad average, at 3.5 officers, you're at 0.14 officers per thousand. So if it takes a while for an officer to get there, or what have you, it's because they are backed up. They don't have resources. They don't have the manpower to actually supply the amount of people or provide services to the folks here in the city of Sunnyside. This is also really turning us to go to online reporting. And so that's not really our way of doing business. We don't normally do it that way. We do like to have an officer show up. I think that people deserve that. I think they like that when an officer shows up to a house, even if it's for a minor vandalism thing. Might be minor vandalism to you, but it's not to the individual who is reporting the case, correct? I mean, it's just not. So for them to give you a call, that means something. But we're at that point now where we have to minimize officers. One of the ways to do that is to offer online reporting for our citizens to report their own vandalism, their own thefts, their own trespassing, all of that. They basically have a form. Officers eventually take a look at those, act on the things that they can, and most cases that they can't. Right, that there is nothing there for them to respond to. So that is something that we are looking at now. It's going to take us anywhere from the fastest might be 60 days to get something like that. And then we're talking with the company that does this, and they're anywhere from 60 to 9 months out. So 60 days to 9 months. Right. But I think we have a pretty strong case to get it out here. So we've already started pleading that case early, and they're saying, yeah, you guys probably can do this. So any questions here? This is pretty alarming here. This is quite a reality check. Anything that we can answer for you?
Council members, this is a lot of information. Do we have any questions at this point? Council members on Zoom, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report.
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you. All right, carry on.
Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this next one is our 2022 staffing nutrition, and it's a couple of different colors, but it is almost identical to the 2019-2020 demonstration that you had earlier, and the numbers are just a little bit off, and I have to say that our staff have done an exemplary job of stepping up, filling in the gaps, and working through to hold the line, so to speak, to the tune of working sometimes all but 1 day out of 7 out of 8 days before they turn around and roll right back into the regular work schedule, simply because of COVID issues, the violence that we've had, and shortages based on vacancies. And as the chief indicated before, we can't fill any of these. There is no magic bullet that will fill these slots by tomorrow. When we hire one of these positions, they are basically an empty uniform for the better part of a year, unless they are a lateral transfer that we're getting. But the problem is that everybody else in the valley and everybody else in the state is searching for the same folks. So we're constantly, and the Steel and Cup program is alive and well, folks. Neighboring agencies are doing it to us all the time. But the thing to remember here is, just like before, we showed you there was 55% of the commissioned officers were eligible to retire by age or years of service. Right now, we're facing 30%. So it's no it's very little difference in terms of numbers. But the thing that we're facing is that, as the chief said, the folks that we have working for us have done an exemplary job of holding the line. The problem is how long can they? And you know, we realize that paying overtime is cheaper than hiring additional people. But the problem is that if we don't take care of our people, we will burn them up. And it's something that they cannot sustain for an extended period of time. You know, we're looking there that everything in purple on this one are folks that are eligible to retire by age or years of service. The blue are trainees and reds are vacants. The vacant task force detective position came up recently as of April 1 because of promoting an acting sergeant position out of the detective slot to provide direct supervision to the patrol squads. So this is, again, it's just another representation of, we've seen this in the past. I can tell you with some certainty that next year we're going to have, or later this year, we're going to have some continued problems, and the overtime is not going to stop just because we can't sustain.
And looking at the next thing, I'm going to show another slide here in just a moment, but before I do, I want you to take a look at those purple, the purple positions up there. Those purple positions, there's 9 of them. So out of those 9, we want to take the top 3 out. That's the chief commander and the 2 commanders. They're not going to count in this particular equation for right now. And so what you see below that, those are all operational positions. Right? Those are people that are reactive, proactive. They are police officer executive personnel that provide services to the public out on the streets to one level or another. So we go to the next slide. So the next slide here is basically a request for additional personnel. And what you see in black there are those that are here, right? They make up the police department currently, as you see it. The 2 reds are vacancy, the purples again are at the bottom are trainees, but the yellows are those that are requesting from council to fund. And those are 4 positions. And the purple positions I saw that I talked about in the previous slide, those are 6 people that can retire today. Okay, those folks can just walk away. They can just, here's keys, thank you for everything, and off they go. And what I'm requesting here is 4 out of those 6 folks be hired before those folks turn in paperwork. And the one thing about police departments and cities and counties is that they wait till there's an actual opening. And the problem with that, it becomes very problematic because, again, we go back to that 1 year, right? So each one of those persons are a year behind, right? So each one, you're now 4 years down, or how many years. If you have 3 people leave, you're 3 years behind because each one of those folks are independents and not all of them are guaranteed to make it. So you have to think ahead of that and be able to hire folks that are eligible to retire before they even talk about retirement. So we know they've got 20+ years. We know they are of age, and we're saying that we have to start hiring their replacements today. So in a year from now, if they decide to leave, or in 6 months from now, we are that much further in the game and replacing those numbers. So right there, what you're seeing there is you've got 34 positions, is what you have on that particular graph. And that graph shows pre-hire. That actually shows an overhire of 4 individuals. in order to fill 4 out of those 6 that can leave. And so when those decide to leave, if they 2 of them leave, now you're down to 32 people. 3 of them leave, and you're down to 31 people, right? So you just don't know how long you're going to be fully staffed. You just don't. It could be minutes, days, months, years. You just don't know. So that's basically what this shows. It shows that our request is to be forward thinking about this, and for us to be able to hire prior to these folks, in order to do some troubleshooting and take care of business before it actually happens. Because this is all predictable. This is all predictable, and you can prevent the fallout by basically hiring in advance. So it's already there. It's showing to you. It shows you where your problems are going to be. Next slide, please. This slide basically shows 34 positions. This is what the expanded commission positions reveal. This is what it looks like. And it's where you have 34 officers from the chief to the newest officer in place. That's what all this graph shows right here. That's what this organization chart shows. But it shows us to where we're able to be a little more effective, a little more proactive with things that are going on out here on the streets today. Next slide, please. This here is the 5-year plan. If you were to provide fund 4 officers today, so to speak, or let's say today, I'm just saying, if you were to get those 4 officers in place, and then you start hiring 1 officer a year for the next 5 years, you would be at 39 officers. Now, keep in mind, at 39 officers at the end of 5 years, you're going to be in that 30,000 range or better, right? As time goes on, as this city grows, you're going to be at 30,000 plus people that actually reside here and operate here. But your day trade is going to be in that 50,000 range as to what you service on a daily basis that comes in and out of here through commerce. That's what you'll have. You are still going to be at those numbers that we showed you for 2014 or 2019 and 2022. You'll still be there because you're not hiring. We're not hiring fast enough, and we're not doubling those up to get us closer to 50. You would actually have to take this model right here where you supply 4 this year, and we would almost have to hire 2 officers per year for the next 5 years to get you to 45 officers in 5 years. And now you're starting to cook the gas at that point, right? You're actually getting closer to servicing at 2 officers per 1,000. So with that, those are the challenges. We do have some methods that we're going to be implementing in order to attack it. Not a lot is sustainable without the manpower. It just isn't. If laws continue to remain restricted, you're going to need twice the investigators that you once did to do the job, because you take those effective tools away that we had back in 2009, 10, and 11. The things that they were able to quell the problem with back then, you no longer have today. Those were probably your most effective tools. And that's where we're at. And that's where we're at today. But that concludes our presentation, and we certainly stand for questions.
Council members, questions, comments? Questions? Yes, sir.
On the new hires, what are the percentages of those that don't make it?
They're relatively low. The percentages of those that do not make it are relatively low. It kind of varies. It varies on the individual. And but for the most part, we get them to the program. For the most part, we do. So if you had 2 out of those 3 are going to make it. They're going to make it to the program. And so it's relatively, by the time they get out of the academy, it's pretty good. But even the academy has gone away from using actual police officers to teach, and they're going to civilians to teach officers that do the job. We're finding that problematic on the street, and that's really going to increase the number of people that won't make it.
In addition to that, typically when our officers come back from the academy, the academy time is 720 hours. With them coming back, normally they go through another 3 months of field training. What we're finding is instead of 3 months, that is a minimum of 4 months now, because we're finding the discrepancies of and the gaps, what we refer to as gap training, that the changing of the instructors at the academy is now providing gaps in their experience, where they don't know how to effectively do their job out here, and then we have to go back and kind of bone that up a little bit. So it's every little bit is adding on as it goes.
Other questions?
I have a couple. Going back to 2009 and 10, when we had a game team, one of the things that made it so successful was that we made our undesirables uncomfortable. And then we did this by serving warrants and pushing the crime-free housing ordinance. Now, I know that a lot of the crime-free housing ordinance has been gone away with. What are we, do we have somebody specifically set aside to aggressively serve warrants?
We do. We with the approval of our street crime sergeant last December, so now we have that in place. We had the street crimes officer selected, and so all of that launched on Friday. So that was a couple of days ago, a few days ago here, and so that launched on Friday. And so they are the ones that are going to be responsible for doing that. They'll be hitting what they can, and they will be putting that pressure. They're also going to be our crime for rental housing specialists to some degree. And crime for rental housing is still part of our game. It's still not, it didn't go away. It's just that's being challenged. Certain aspects of it is being challenged. And so there are things that where crime for rental housing is going to be a huge part of the game, because they're going to need it for the hotels, they're going to need it for houses, problematic houses and areas. But as far as serving warrants, the warrants that you're talking about are warrants against people, not search warrants themselves. Search warrants themselves do require investigative time, and it does require that in order for us to get in, and that will be another avenue that will be pursued as evidence allows.
Thank you.
Council, other questions? Ms. Hart, question?
Not at this time.
No question, Mr. Mayor. Well, actually, maybe a question. Chief, where did you get your population estimate numbers? Because that's the one thing I'm a little bit concerned about. I don't believe we're going to be at 25,000 for another decade. I mean, in April 2021, OFM said we had 16,400. I expect in April 2022, we'll probably see 18,000, maybe even 19,000. But 25,000 is a long haul. I mean, when I got elected to council in 2003, we had 13,950 in the community. It took a long time to get us at the 18,000 mark, if that's where we're at right now.
Now, our numbers are speculative, no doubt about it, but I think any number that you're seeing from the census is absolutely false. I disagree with factual numbers. I don't think that is not there at all. If the census tells you you have 16,950 people, you have more than that. I assure you, especially in a channel like this, where we have undocumented folks that aren't going to reveal, they're not going to play that game. And when you're going to houses that are very stacked, especially during certain times of the year, you're going to have houses that have actually become more populated per residence because of the work that's involved here and what it offers. It goes up even more so during that spring, summer, fall month. Or months. So I can understand where you're coming from. I mean, you're just looking at the census as is.
Well, no, without due respect, I understand. With all due respect, Chief, I understand the census is definitely off. Don't get me wrong. I realize that. But OFM doesn't use the census, does it? I believe it uses other metrics in order to determine your population statistics.
It may. I just don't know how. I just don't know how exactly it could be I just don't see that I just don't know how they can do it. I think the best gauge out here are those that service it day in and day out. And I think that we are seeing parts of that now. I mean, we are seeing where we are understaffed and unable to provide services for our public. But I just, and I agree with you, I'm not totally disagreeing with you. I think that there are certainly some ways that OFM provides that are pretty accurate to some degree, but there's no way you can tell the whole story. Can't do that.
Well, no, and I want you to know, Chief, I'm just trying to figure out where you're getting your numbers from. That's all. To be perfectly honest with you, I've read the ICMA report from 2021, on police staffing. I understand the rule of 60. I appreciated your presentation tonight, and you have my support.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And yeah, our numbers come from, basically, we look at the census and we're stacking on top of the census. So whatever the census is telling us, we know that based on the type of service and the demands of services that are coming from us that we can't keep up with, we know that we are understaffed because we are overpopulated. And so we do have to stack something up for you, because if I were to give you just 16,950 people or whatever it may be, we're going to be closer to a mark that we certainly are not. I think that's very skewed, and that would be skewed information for me to provide you. I think I have to give you worst case scenario.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I would have to agree with the chief on this one as far as the numbers go. And there's certain individuals in town, certain organizations in town who are going to have a very different perspective than what the census numbers, whatever agency they come from, would say. Obviously, police, fire, paramedics, and those sort of people get into different homes and see different things than what the average person sees. Most of us don't get into an awful lot of houses. Ironically, the carpet cleaner is one who does get into a lot of houses. And it has been interesting to me where I get into a house and one person calls me and it's told me to clean one bedroom. And in that one bedroom resides an entire family. And they live in that one bedroom as an entire family because the next bedroom is rented out to another family. And the third bedroom is rented out to yet another family. They share the kitchen, they share the bathroom. This is fairly common, not just in Sunnyside, but in the Valley. And I've run into this for years. This is not a new thing. This has been, I remember this back when I was in college, I would run into this and I was working for my parents in business. So I do, from my perspective, tend to believe what the chief is saying because I have seen it firsthand, not as much as the police officer, the fire department does, but I have seen it. And so I would definitely say that our numbers are, the actual residents who live in Sunnyside is higher than what the census would indicate. The things that I've taken away from this, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. The first thing I think that I've taken away from this presentation, and this is the second time I've heard it, the first thing we need to do is learn or devise some new policing tactics. The laws, as Commander Bailey said, are not going to go away. We're going to be fighting some of these restrictions, so we've got to come up with some new skills, some new ideas for approaching the job at hand. The other thing that we need to do is somehow improve communication and cooperation between the police and code enforcement. We need to increase the number of officers that we've got. We need better intelligence. And we're going to have to find some sort of a mental health professional, whether we do that as a cooperation between Lower Valley communities or whether we find one on our own. Is that about correct?
That's about correct. And the only thing that was left out would be probably the emphasis on community mobilization, on having the community actually engaging in this problem. That is huge.
Okay. So that being said, I was recently at another city, population about the same as Sunnyside, same type of location as an agricultural community. The only big difference was, and this is a big one, is that community was quite a bit more affluent than the city of Sunnyside as a whole. And recently, I think some years ago they started it, but over the last couple of years, they really increased the presence of cameras around the city. Every entrance, exit to the city has a camera. The truck stop has a camera. Lots of cameras on the downtown area, major arteries through the town. Everything was, and a number of screens. If you drive by the police station and they have the blinds open, you can just see a wall of screens where they're keeping an eye on what's going on. I did not have enough time where I could coordinate with the city manager to get a tour of that program, but they report ridiculous decrease in crime as a result of that. They advertise it rather heavily. And so everybody who comes into town knows that they're being watched. There's cameras on them. I've seen these programs working successfully in other countries as well. I believe England and Scotland both have a fairly heavy presence of police cameras around the city. On one level, that really bothers me because I do not like the idea of cameras observing me everywhere I go and everything I do. And so I think about that. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Then I came home last Tuesday to the news that there was yet another shooting on North Avenue. And I'm thinking, you know, this is what they're asking for. By doing that, they're moving us in that direction. There's not going to be any choice. How much does that kind of camera coverage help as far as the necessary number of police officers on the street?
I think that and just like you hit it on the head when you said that these successful communities all have cameras. And the reason why they have them is because you have to be in multiple places at one time. Now you need the personnel to, number one, to monitor them. Number two is to respond to them. So you still have that need for personnel. However, it does allow you to catch up, right? It doesn't, so you're not having to hire a lot of people at one given time. It does give us some ability to basically curtail some crime, because once you announce that this is there, it becomes a deterrent, right? It does, but it also becomes a target. You have people that are going to attempt to take the cameras out, and that's a given. But for the most part, it becomes a deterrent in those particular locations, and so they find other locations to conduct business. But yes, the more cameras, to some degree, the better. And there are some places that don't need it throughout the city, and there are some places that do. Our parks do need them. Our downtown needs them. We need them in all of our major ingress egress that comes in and out of the city. Those are escape routes and points. Certain areas that are highly problematic with gangs on the south side and in the central portion of our area here, anywhere near school, right? Those schools that we're seeing things from a different perspective than the school seeing it. All of that is extremely helpful. And I think that adds to your ability not only to not only to respond and reduce crime, but also people will get very comfortable with that, and it adds to their feeling of safety, right? It adds to their overall. If I got nothing to hide, I don't have an issue with the camera. But there are those that don't like just privacy issue. They don't have anything to hide. They just don't like, being viewed all the time. They don't like that idea, right? It's more the idea than anything else. But if any of you have been to Washington, D.C. or to New York City, you have cameras galore there, right? That is nothing but cameras. They're seeing you walk in different directions all the time, coming and going. New York, I've been in their surveillance room, which is, about the size of this entire building. That's how big that room is, and it is wall-to-wall TVs, and you have sensors from all around the world in that TV or in that particular room. And New York Police Department monitors that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But they also monitor public downtown areas, Times Square, alleys that are associated with problematic areas. And it's amazing how they're able to respond and take care of business. So anytime that we can start suggesting and recommending surveillance, I'll call it that for a moment, just because it does help us in that respect. But to enhance our safety here and to enhance the ability to reduce crime, I'm all for that. But it does have to have quality resolution. It has to pass the muster of court, right? So when attorneys look at it and the judge looks at it, it has to leave very little to no doubt. They have to be able to convict from it, or else it just becomes, a monitoring device.
Right. Well, we don't want anything that looks like an old-fashioned bank money camera.
Right.
All right, council members, any further questions or comments? Steve, is there any further information you wish to share, or?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their attention this evening. We did throw a lot at you, but it was time that we readdress this again. Over the years, it's been put out there, but this is just our time to get it done. An extra thank you to the Public Safety Committee who had to go through this twice. I thank you, and I apologize to you. So thank you very much for everybody's questions, your open minds, and will hopefully help us out with some of the things that we've requested. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ola, anything else?
Nothing.
All right, well, we definitely have a lot to think about. There's a lot of information to process, and we're gonna have to make some decisions on down the line here. Further discussion, so I invite all of you to think seriously about what we heard tonight. And some of this stuff we're gonna agree with, some of it we may have other options in mind, but we will be bringing this up again later, so thank you. So without objection, we will adjourn this meeting at 8:30 p.m.